Hello. How's it going?
Oh no,
What happened?
I dropped a bunch of stitches.
So, I guess the first thing is that Elijah, our clown, said that he is going to be busy for at least the next few weeks. So, hopefully, he's going to be so successful that he doesn't need to worry about his business. So then he can come back and join us in our book clubs. But with that in mind, I'll try to do as well as he did, and just to run the logistics like that. But just to introduce ourselves, this is the last session that we have on The Lonely Men of Faith by Soloveitchik until we move to the next book.
And what's the next book?
I think it is The Forgiveness of Kabbalah.
Abramson, right? The Kabbalah of Forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Henry Aberman.
Thank you. I thought it was just me having trouble saying that.
What's his name? Abramson. I don't know how to say that name. Even though it sounds simple. It feels like it should be simple. Henry H.
Cool.
But yeah.
Yeah. I just ordered books and I got two packages outside my door. So
Ooh.
I'm thinking my books are here. I ordered 3 books this time. The next 2 we're studying are somewhere in there.
I'm gonna try the Kindle way this time.
Are you?
That works. I haven't done Kindle in a long time. I've had it like stashed somewhere in one of the boxes, and I'm gonna try to get that going again and see how useful it is.
Honestly, what I like most about Kindle is not feeling guilty for writing in them.
Because
that's part of why I like using them so much. Because you can just erase it. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as permanent.
True.
Pencil.
Yeah. So we were reading. What chapters did we have? I think it was 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
Yeah, my copy is like different from y'all's.
Right.
So I just read the rest. But
yeah, so does anyone have any preliminary thoughts or anything they want to share?
I wish I didn't keep going blank when we go to talk about things. I had notes in 8 and 10, I think, mostly. Was it 8 and 10? Oh, 8 and 9. I had some.
I don't understand Roman numerals, so could somebody tell me what the Roman numerals are?
It's like a V111. That's your 8.
Okay. Thank you.
Your microphone is pretty low, Trey. I don't know if it's
Hello. I came to you guys with a miracle. Who's echoing?
Not sure.
You're echoing.
Am
I don't know. Actually, it all sounds fine.
I am silly. I I forgot to turn off my YouTube. That's what happened.
Oh, you're hearing us in 2 tabs at once.
Yes. So you forgot the StreamYard link, but I came to interrupt you guys with a commercial message, which is, if you are watching this book club, I expect you to be donating $5 a month to Fountain of Comfort. And at this point, it's not about dollars. It's about the number of people who care. I don't necessarily, I need to show to the people who have real amounts of money that there are real numbers of people who actually care about this and are involved, and that it's not just Jacob and 5 of his friends, 4 of whom don't actually really care, and Jacob's strong-armed into things. There has to be some showing that the people on this channel have some sort of commitment to actually be involved in Fountain of Comfort. And so please, I don't think asking $5 a month is too much. It's for anybody. And if you want to give more, that's really nice. But that's not what it's about. That's not why I'm doing the commercial messages. The money is out there. There are people who have the money to make things happen if they are convinced that we are actually making things happen. And so for right now, it's a question of how many people care. And I thought with 900 people watching who are subscribed to my channel, and tens, sometimes hundreds of people who actually listen to, and watch the videos, that we could get 100 people giving $5 a month. So we have $500 a month. And that would mean that I didn't waste the past 3 years building up this channel. But if people can't even give to a charity like Fountain of Comfort, much less give to me, then I completely wasted my time. So please subscribe, and really subscribe, as in go to PayPal and $5 a month, subscribe. And yeah, talk to you guys later.
So wait, before you pop off, John Van Donk said I was to tell you hi from him tonight.
John Van Donk said to say hi. Yes. So John Van Donk, yesterday
Reading estuary online.
Yes, yesterday we went to dinner, and he said he has no clue why someone in Ontario, Canada, is talking about CRC Voices about my channel, which is a pretty good question. And he's right. I have no idea how we got to the point where on CRC Voices somebody's talking about my channel, but that means everybody on CRC Voices needs to be giving $5 a month to Fountain of Comfort. That's what it means. And then I'm going to pop off. Bye-bye.
I have mentioned that.
If you show up for a commercial message, you should stay for the book club.
Yeah, contribute to the book club as well.
If you can ask for $5 a month, you can contribute to the book club.
Yeah. Cool. So, with that in mind,
I'm sorry.
I don't know if we talked about.
I'm just laughing. Apparently, people can't talk about Jacob other places without being told one.
They donate money. Yeah.
Yeah, anybody has any thoughts, general, or on chapter 8 specifically, or on just the first chapter that we've read this week?
Can someone help me? What is a dialectic? I don't know what that means.
Oh, I have to look that up.
Elect.
Look it up again. It's something to do with two parts of something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's when like two parts are in conversation, and then usually it's used in terms of like Hegelian dialectic. So it's the thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Mhm.
In general, I think it can just mean a conversation or an argument. It's also sometimes used interchangeably as a word for logic, usually by people who are being really archaic for no reason.
Okay, since you're
Sorry, that's me
using
being judgy. But
no,
No,
no, I
but
like
here
some
he was
sass.
talking about it in terms of the Adam 1 and Adam 2 position where you're looking at either, because here he's talking about between the cosmic and covenantal experience of God reflected in. I love these notes. I really do. But the words.
yeah, I have a personal vendetta against footnotes that take an entire page. But
Who likes
I'm-
that?
I kind of like it.
no,
I'm
some
a big
people
fan.
like it. My husband likes it. This is why I have a personal vendetta against it. I've had to read too many of his papers to help him out.
Oh, not in a paper, of course, but in a book, it's nice.
I like page 54 and 55 where 3/4 of the two pages are footnotes.
Emma, have you ever read Artemis Fowl?
Yes. I don't remember
All
footnotes
the-
in that one, but you know what? I'll give it a pass.
No, because the reason you would find the secret behind the book, so there's like secret meanings within the book through the
Mhm.
footnotes. So they each page, in the footnotes, they would have like a secret codex, so that if you add them up together, you would get a note. So that's why you would look.
See, I could never solve that puzzle. I tried and I couldn't figure it out. So maybe that's where the hatred
That-
comes from.
Maybe you have to go back and reread it.
Maybe I have to go back and reread Artemis Fowl and crack the fairy language in the footnotes and the margins.
Yeah. Anyways, aside from footnotes, what do we think of chapter 8?
So chapter 8. Okay.
I'll start. I really enjoyed this chapter.
Yeah.
I feel that everything is coming into a culmination, everything is coming to a head, and I'm like really, really excited about this. I think I started out the book just very frustrated, not really understanding what he's trying to do here, and then as it sort of started to understand more and more and be like, okay, that's starting to make more sense, it's starting to apply, we're starting to have cohesive views. And I was really touched by this chapter. And because like I think at the first start of the book, it felt very much like you're either on the ship or you're off the ship. You're either with Orthodox Judaism or you're not. Like either or. But then I found in this chapter it sort of said like, no, I'm going to expand this innate intention, and I'm going to explain why having this innate tension between like the loneliness of God and the closeness of God and the tension there. Like that's completely wrong. That is not something that has to be separate. They can be happening at the same time. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like very, very true. And it felt like I felt like in chapter 8 he was being more poetic. I know in the previous chapters he's done that, but it felt like when he started breaking down Adam 1 and then Adam 2, like he said, okay, then we have this point, and then we have this point. So this is what the trees mean and everything like this. And then in this chapter 8, he's using like, I don't know, I felt like I'll just read a random, like, I'll just read a random sentence to show what I'm saying. God created two Adams in sanctified. Rejection of either as aspect of humanity would be tantamount to an act of disapproval of the divine scheme of creation by God as being very good. And I just show that because it's like, look, like I feel in the previous chapters, he would have been more like poetic. He would have been more systemic in his thinking rather than poetic. And that's why I'm really liking this chapter because I feel like he's bringing out the heart of the reader.
I liked the fact that like the tension doesn't have to be resolved. I agree with you on that one.
Which yeah, because expanding, I feel like it's very and I think it's comparative with other religions. I think especially in the current century, we can't have tensions. Tensions can't exist. There always has to be an explanation. There always has to be a reason. You can't really sort of work the boundary of it. And I think that's why I have like so much respect for Judaism. Like,
I don't.
get an answer for that.
That hasn't been my experience of Christianity at all.
What specifically? Sorry.
The need to break all the tensions and define things.
I mean, I'm not saying that was necessarily like my experience being in my bubble, but I'm just saying like I do think that there is a difference in systemic theology of Judaism and Christianity. Am I wrong on that?
I don't claim to be an expert or anything, but all the a lot of the theology and thinking I've learned and done and the stuff I've been taught has been very much in this tension. And actually my husband and I talk about it a lot, and that's a lot of why he became Catholic out of Protestantism, is having that space.
Yeah, but you have to admit you had about I don't know the history of it, but I would say like haven't you had like 2,000 years what the Trinity is and having debates about heresies and everything like that?
Well, sure, but that's because of that tension. That's figuring out how to define it as much as we can while holding that space and not over-defining it. Most of the heresies come from trying to break that tension and define it too much one way or the other.
Right, propositional tyranny.
Mm-hmm. Especially with the Trinity, actually.
Right, but like you don't see any inclination there as trying to figure things out rather than just saying it's a mystery, rather than having
there is an inclination, for sure, but that's a not necessarily a failure, but it's very important to keep both things in mind and keep in mind that we won't resolve everything propositionally.
I'm not okay. Let me expand this a little bit. I'm not saying I think the reason I'm saying this is that Christianity came from Jewish thought as well as Greek thought, and I think that that's a major separation. Islam also followed that as well, for taking a lot from Greek thought. I mean, just I hope you'll follow me in that branch. And I think that's created means different ideas of how we nail things down. Does that make sense? And I would say because, okay, we're in agreement. Yeah.
There's more of a tendency. I see this pitched all the time. This Christianity has to define everything and is super wedded to Greek philosophy and Greek thought, while Judaism lets things be a mystery. Or Eastern Orthodoxy lets things be a mystery, while Roman Catholicism has to nail everything down and falls into problems. And I want to push back against that narrative because I don't think it's accurate.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. I think I'm not trying to say it's an all or nothing thing. I'm just saying it is percentage-wise.
Okay, I see your point. Okay. Sorry to derail.
No, but I think that's an important part, I think, as well, for clarifying that. So I think you are right that there definitely is a sort of a box that's created comparison. Any other comments on chapter 8? So I know we all come from different backgrounds, but I think it'd be an interesting question. How have we experienced the loneliness of God that he talks about in this chapter? The existential loneliness of God. And how we experience that sort of tension between number one, sometimes number two. If we want to share that.
It's a good
Good
question.
Yeah. I had a similar question of like trying to ask us, what does covenantal mean for us? Like if we have examples from our lives, and I feel like those two questions are very similar. So, but I have to think about that as well. Your question.
Yeah. Has anyone read C.S. Lewis' Surprised by Joy?
I tried to. I didn't finish it.
It's kind of his autobiography, and a lot. I think the joy he talks about, because he talks about some sort of like longing or joy that seems to come from beyond the world that would strike him even before he believed in God, and was part of why he came to believe in God. I think that has parallels to the Adam number 2 loneliness.
What added to the loneliness, or how did he connect it?
I think the way he describes it is similar to how that's described here.
Right.
That loneliness. And it was a pretty impactful book for me, just based on like when I read it and everything. So it's really it influenced a lot how I think about my own spiritual experience.
Yeah.
So I was making that connection as I read here.
What was the question we were? Trey asked something, and then you said about how we perceive covenantal, and I missed kind of what the.
I was saying that I liked Trey's question, and that I was thinking of asking, I think, a similar question, which is, what does being covenantal mean in our own lives? Like, how do we experience it? Because especially at the end, jumping to the last chapter, he really defines even more clearly what covenantal means by making sure that we understand that there is this religious person that acts as if he's covenantal, but really it's a silly utilitarian move. So it seems like it's even more narrow than we might think. At least was my perception of what he was talking about.
Yeah, that was an interesting part.
I've heard the word covenant too often relating to church structure, rules. It's funny because the other day when Jacob was going to do the Bible study, supposedly on sex, and tomorrow, I think it was, when I said I was thinking of my relationships with my ex-husband and then with Jack, and I said, basically, I figured if you had sex with somebody, you were married. That's kind of the belief that I took into both relationships. And Jacob said that was very halakhic. And it's funny, but so I'm guessing that covenantal has something to do with that same place. But but I wouldn't have put those thoughts together because I think it's supposed to have something to do with those two places. You know, like with that's all I got. It's funny. I've really enjoyed reading this book, but when I go to talk about it, I'm kind of shutting down. So there's something here that's poking at places that aren't settled. But I'm gonna just listen in and see if I can contribute.
Talking about covenantal love, I think I remember being in estuary, and we were talking about unconditional love, and we realized it couldn't exist because there's always going to be conditions. For like, one of the conditions is you have to exist. And then I said, okay, well, what do we mean by that term of unconditional love? And I realized what it meant was persevering love. And that's what I think of also with the covenant. You keep messing up. You try your best to make amends. And the person on this side tries their best to accept you. And that's sort of what I think of with the covenant between Israel and God, is that there's this sort of thing where like Israel messes up, they try to make amends. God tries to accept them. God makes it say that you need to do this, and there's this sort of back at it. They're still in tandem together, and it's not like they're trying to sort of buy each other off. They're sort of trying to persevere over their mistakes in love, and I think that with people who are like the closest to me, and I think about having that covenant where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna mess up, you're gonna mess up as well, but our goal should be, as long as we're gonna make amends, we're gonna keep sticking it.
Yeah. When you talk about unconditional love, it reminds me, Rabbi Sachs actually has a good article / like podcast episode or just like sermon on talking about Esau and Isaac and their relationship, and talking about how that is the love of a father and a child, similar to, like you mentioned, with God and Israel, is unconditional in the way that, people, when people talk about Esau, especially, they say how like he was the he was the bad guy on the block, like he was making trouble all the time and all that, but Isaac still loved him. And he loved him exactly because it was unconditional, because there was this bond that couldn't be severed. So there had to be space for amendment, making amends, right? So I guess it's something also like that space that has to be open, so you have to be open. The other party needs to be open. There is some openness about like there's always a way back. So yeah, that just, and I really liked when he was talking about it. It was a very good, sermon, and kind of like very emotional. So it's reminded me of that.
Okay, I did want to share, since I did the covenant part, I did want to share times where I felt like Adam number 1 and Adam number 2. And there's this JW song called Prayer of the Lowly One. I don't know if there's a Christian version of it, but it's like the most heart-wrenching song. Like literally everyone cries when they hear the song, because it's all about pretty much that your life is sucks and everything like that. And I remember singing it and being like so close to everybody. And I remember being like locked in, so emotional, but it's sort of a good cry. And then the song ends, and then the pastor comes up the stage and then says, so-and-so has been disfellowshipped. And it's just, you feel so lonely in that moment. Like, you don't know what that is. It just means that you can't talk to the person forever. It feels such a, because at the start of the song, you're like, I feel God's presence. But after that, you feel ripped. You feel like you're 1,000 miles away from anything that could do that. And yeah, I feel like that tension. I feel like that tension happens a lot. But that was what I thought.
Makes me think of, being in a like the covenantal feeling. Is it something from what you described, Trey, but also kind of like what I'm feeling and when I'm thinking about examples? There's something about a realization of a loss of control or a loss of agency to an extent. Right. So the first thing that I was thinking about, like existential feeling, would be kind of like this, what people say, like you're only a speck of dust in the universe, which you can turn in a very pessimistic way, and you can turn into a very positive, like optimistic way of like you're only a speck but you matter, or you're only a speck and so you don't matter, right? But either way, you feel so small, and I wonder if there's something about the realizing that you're like you can try to conquer and be and figuring out how to be this utilitarian person of like, okay, I have all the right habits, I put my house in order, I do all the right things, or I try to be this good person. But there's the other side of the covenant that I can't, like, I don't know, I can't control, and they have to do they have to do their part, right? And I mean, so that, and it's something that I feel now even more so, than before. So that's kind of like I don't know if that makes sense to you. That's kind of like the same thing that you're
No,
thinking.
no, it does. And maybe if I can give an illustration, have you ever had a really good morning, and then you get a call, and it's a call that, like, everything in the morning feels so normal, and it feels like you're going about it routine, and then you get a call or you hear something on the news, and then it's just whole day changed, and you will remember about that day as a normal day for like the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Does that sort of ring a bell?
That you start the day and everything's normal, then something happens and changes
Yeah,
it. Yeah, I mean that
yeah,
happened to me a week ago. So
yeah,
um,
yeah,
it
yeah.
happened to a lot of people a week ago. So yeah, that's kind of like the thing that I'm thinking about. There's like, you can't, you might think, you can't. These things they're set in motion, and then you understand that at some point, it's sometimes you just need to react. All you have to do is like make sure that you react the right way. Like you've kind of trained, you practice a lot when things are fine and you can predict them, but then this is when you test your faith, right? I heard this from somebody who was saying like there's the word, like the emuna in in Hebrew, which is kind of faith or trust. And you say, I have full trust in God, or full faith in God, and it's easy to do when things are more or less predictable. But then, like there are moments in time when you're really tested, and that's when it should kick in. Before that, you're just kind of like practicing it. So yeah.
When faith should kick in?
when you don't know, when things seem so, when things seem so bad, and you really, it's very hard to think clearly, especially it's very hard to, especially like just rationally, to consider all the things, because you're in something. You can't just like pull yourself out of it. You're in it. Like, so that's where you have to like, that's where like faith, the really strong one like that, and we're not like something that is axiomatically needs to kick in.
Got to think about that.
This book was dense.
Mm-hmm.
This book was
It
pretty
was.
dense.
Mhm.
And coming off the heels of the Sachs book, which was pretty fluffy. So it's a tough one to talk about, because it's very, very philosophical, very abstract. We're talking chapter 8 still, but I mean the only thing I pulled out of chapter 8 was, I made a note from page 79, but I don't know which version y'all are reading, but he was talking about halakha, and that it has a monistic approach to reality and rejects dualism, and believes that there is only one world, not divisible into secular and hallowed, or I guess sacred sectors.
Yeah.
And I guess like
6 in this book that I've got, so somewhere between 66 and 79, I guess.
Yeah.
I like it.
Anyway, I guess I was just that was kind of a striking thing. I hadn't really thought about that, or it hadn't occurred to me that dichotomy that I think a lot of us in the Western Christian world kind of take for granted, of like secular and sacred, maybe doesn't have that level of prominence. And
Okay, I have a weird question then. Do most Christians just take that for granted, that it's true?
I think it's a pretty strong paradigm in Catholic and Orthodox Christianity.
It kind of depends what you mean
By secular?
by like secular and sacred, or like division between them.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I never ever thought about it hardly. I don't even think I thought about it when I was in the Anglican church, when I was first married. It wasn't until joining the Reformed church, where we lived for 25 years, that it really, I mean, people kind of talked about it, but the language was different. And it was more that whole, it lived in my head in this space where everything was people who believed in Jesus and people who didn't believe in Jesus. And it was so important that we talk constantly about Jesus. And I'm like, but when I got to the Reformed church, and the Reformed church would do things like they would have projects around, and different, not just ministries that were talking about stuff, but actually doing stuff. And they would still talk from a secular and a sacred viewpoint. And I remember living in my town, and like my kids did not go to the Christian school. Jacob was in the deaf. I had one kid in the provincial school for the deaf. Like, he was not going to go to the local Christian school. And then his brother, like, partially it was cost and partially it was just, I had no concept of having to go to a religious school to be brought up, and not being a a person who could think for myself and take God seriously. So I'm like, why on earth do I need to send them to a Christian school so they will think Christian? Because I don't know. I never before saw the world divided up like that, like in these different segments. And yet I see it other places. And I mean, I read what it said on that page. That page really grabbed me too. I mean, I got all kinds of lines around the spots where he said things. The halakha believes there is only one world. And I put an exclamation mark beside it. There's one world. One. And I thought, yeah, not divisible into secular and hallowed sectors, which can either plunge into ugliness and hatefulness or be roused to meaningful redeeming activity, gathering up all latent powers in a state of holiness. Accordingly, the task of covenantal man is to be engaged not in dialectical surging forward and retreating, but in uniting the two communities into one community where man is both the creative free agent and the obedient servant of God. And I'm like, why is that not obvious? I mean, I feel really stupid because I've always just, to me, that makes sense. Am I just really kind of weird? So you were saying something about that, Jonathan. I apologize. What were you saying?
No, I don't have a lot more to add to that. It struck me, like I guess it struck you. And I don't necessarily know that I find it to be earth shattering or paradigm changing, I guess, right? It's just as easy for me to kind of see the world in a sacred, profane dichotomy as it is to just be like, oh, I can just reconcile and unify them into one world, of which there are different attributes or something, right? So I don't know. The implications are not super strong, but I mean, I'll admit that I read probably the last 60 pages over the last 55 minutes or so. So not everything is sunk in. I tried to just be a good student and do the reading assignment before class. There's probably more implications there that could be unpacked, but
well, what does it mean to unify them? I mean, look at okay, so.
Well, maybe not to unify them, but just to not.
But it talks about that.
I think it does say unify.
It talks about that.
Talks about unifying the communities. Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to connect it to the halachic man, or where he has the metaphor, I guess, of the having the glasses, kind of like what VIII mentions of halacha as glasses, where everything that you see permeates. Everything that you see through it. So you see a sunset or a sunrise, you see it through halacha, which is really saying, I think what it says is that everything in the world, the Torah has something to say about it, which is a very kind of if you just think about halacha and kind of it's both fun. It could be both funny and impressive about how it has something to say about tying your shoelaces and doing this and doing that. And I kind of find myself as well every time that I have an opportunity, every time that I have a question or something, I just say to myself, or I tell to my wife, because we're not that permeated in it, of you know what? Let me see what the Jews say about it. There's some perspective about it that halacha has. There's some commentary about it. There's some specific law, and then maybe customs. There's something. But that is to say that I think that's kind of part of of seeing everything from a lens of, and I think that is where I'll make another connection. I think that is where the Kabbalistic idea of the sparks of the nitzotzot is also related, where everything in the world has a shell to it and a spark to it. So everything, from the apple you eat, from your shoelaces, everything there has a mundane aspect for it, or has an aspect that is mundane, and it has an aspect that you can use it for, unite it with the holy, right? Use it for holiness. You can bless it and do something with it that is meaningful. So
The other line I really liked from here. So when he's talking, after he talks about the uniting force, he says the norm that originates in the covenantal community addresses itself almost exclusively to the majestic community where its realization takes place. And then he gives this metaphor and he says, I would say the norm, in the opinion of Halakha, is the tentacle by which the covenant, like the ivy, attaches itself to and spreads over the world of majesty. I just picture this, like a climbing vine or something, but that the I don't completely understand like the Jewish concept of halakha, because I know it's talking about laws and things, but it's also, says it means the way. And so just that, whatever we're doing, that way that you live through day to day, that kind of is the little tendrils of attaching to stuff. That really kind of creates a nice feeling in me of the fact that gradually everything that we do that is represented in that attaches to something else, that it can actually spread over. Like the world of majesty is that one where, it's like the prioritizing of the achievement and the getting together, ahead and everything. And I'm like, but at the same time, these tiny tendrils of all the little things that, that the halakha represents are taking hold of it. And then I liked reading the footnote under it. Sorry.
Sorry, they're just too long.
It was like a page and a half.
Yeah, I definitely skipped the footnotes in my quick read. I'm more of an endnote person myself.
Yeah. But yeah, that was the section that grabbed me out of chapter 8 too. That bit about the halakha. Where are you?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Background noises.
I'm at the airport.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Chapter.
Trey, you ready to talk about chapter IX?
I'm not Roman, so I don't know what that means.
The X is a 10, and the little one that's in front of it means take away 1.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, I think I need you to speak American, please.
Trey, if you have a problem with
symbols.
Roman numerals, just wait till I tell you about the Roman calendar system.
Do we use that? We sort of use that. Not really, right? Isn't it by the...
No, we do not use it at all, and thank God. It is the worst. I won't do it in the middle of book club, but at some point remind me to explain the Roman calendar system.
Okay, sounds good.
I would not want to have to do math at all in anything Roman. Not really.
It's amazing that they became such good engineers.
So we can also talk about chapter 9 if we want. If somebody has any thoughts about that chapter specifically.
Not so much.
Um, well, I actually wrote a note about, because this is where I think this is where he starts talking about the Western man that belongs and extends help to some religious establishment. So he kind of further separates a covenantal man between covenantal man, like the second Adam the second, and this Adam the first, who engages with a religious community, but engages with it in a quid pro quo fashion, as he describes it, which for me is very. I'm curious what you think about it, and if that is something that you've thought about, like if that is something that. Have you been aware of that distinction before? And I'll just say that for me, that I feel like, for me, that distinction seems very true, because when I first kind of like started engaging, and as I engage with like a religious community, I definitely feel that in one way, acting like Adam the first for me is a very good in. It's a very good way for me to get a foot in the door rationally, to understand like why should I even, bother to go to the synagogue and to go and pray, or do something that seems like I've never done it before in my life, right? So for most of my life, I didn't pray, I didn't go to synagogue. So why would I even start it? And I think thinking in an Adam the first fashion of like, okay, if I do that, praying is like meditation, so it can clear my mind. And going to the synagogue, it's kind of maybe bringing me that community, and it also will help kind of like if I have children, I can like extend that over them. So that kind of aspect kind of gives me a foot in the door into that. But then there is this other persona inside of me that feels like that's not sustainable, and I need to have a more covenantal relationship with the being that I'm actually sacrificing to, that I'm actually talking to. And to me, those distinctions really feel real. So I'm just wondering if anybody else has that kind of like, that has had that before.
I don't know if I have.
Yeah, I think this section kind of gets at is kind of analogous to the whole kind of go to church question of this little corner, right? Like you can't just have these intellectual
What is happening to Trey?
everybody?
Continue. I'm just smiling because this is my part.
I might have to close your camera. It's too distracting, but yeah, you can continue.
You looking at memes or something, buddy? Like, speak up.
Nope.
I'm looking for a passage, but he basically makes a critique of like modern Western man, like in the mode of Adam 1, the first Adam, kind of sort of making this like partial or imperfect attempt at the Adam the second, the man, the lowly man of faith mode, and but the way he said it, I thought was really poignant. So I'm gonna try to find it. But it's kind of like, but again, it's like you got to just like take the plunge. You got to go to church. You got to like participate. You can't just sit on the sidelines and intellectually do everything, which is what Trey does. Obviously.
Yep, that's exactly what I do. And I haven't told anybody else anything different. And it's not like there's anybody in this room who has some super esoteric ideas and then doesn't do anything with them. Nope, you're right.
I don't think I heard everything that you said, so I can't react to it, unfortunately.
It's good. It's good. Just a little TLCD. Yeah, I think that I relate to a lot of what you said, Ben. I guess understanding the sort of Adam 1 perspective, because there definitely is a tussle between, like, I know it's good for me, but I'm not sure I can do it right now. Like that, there's definitely that tussle where it's like, sort of like, I hear these words, sort of bring up previous emotions that are like really hard to get through, or really hard to sort of like fully enter into, right? Like it's sometimes hard to sort of like to let psychology take over, even if it's good for you. To sort of like try into the subconscious, use Jungian thought. Like I know all the symbols are working. I know all the pointers. I know all this, but sometimes it's hard to just sort of like let go.
Let go and let God.
Let go and what?
Let go and let God. Have you heard that before?
No, I've never heard that before. It's
Really?
pretty cringy. No.
Yeah, it is very cringy.
Were you very Protestant, Jonathan?
I mean, yeah, I was raised that way. But that's a pretty Christian-y saying. I found the passage. It's on page 98 in my edition, but it says notwithstanding the fact that Western man is in a nostalgic mood, he is determined not to accept the dialectical burden of humanity. He certainly feels spiritually uprooted, emotionally disillusioned, and, like the old king of Ecclesiastes, is aware of his own tragedy. Yet this pensive mood does not arouse him to heroic action. He, of course, comes to a place of worship. He attends lectures on religion and appreciates the ceremonial, yet he is searching for a faith in all its singularity and otherness, but for religious culture. Yet he is searching not for a faith in all its singularity and otherness, but for religious culture. He seeks not the greatness found in sacrificial action, but the convenience one discovers in a comfortable, serene state of mind. He is desirous of an aesthetic experience rather than a covenantal one, of a social ethos rather than a divine imperative. In a word, he wants to find in faith that which he cannot find in his laboratory or in the privacy of his luxurious home. His efforts are noble, yet he is not ready for a genuine faith experience which requires the giving of one's self unreservedly to God, who demands unconditional commitment, sacrificial action, and retreat. Western man diabolically insists on being successful. Alas, if he wants to be successful even in his adventure with God. Alas, he wants to be successful even in his adventure with God. If he gives of himself to God, he expects reciprocity. He also reaches a covenant with God, but this covenant is a mercantile one. In a primitive manner, he wants to trade favors and exchange goods. The gesture of faith for him is a give and take affair and reflects the philosophy of Job, which led to catastrophe. A philosophy which sees faith as a quid pro quo arrangement and expects compensation for each sacrifice one offers. He goes on and on and on here, but like, I mean, High five, Trey. What's up?
Sorry, I have a comment.
Yeah.
I want to raise my hand after you're done. So what you just said really reminded me of Good Will Hunting, where Robin Williams is talking to I forget his name, Matt Damon, right? And Robin Williams says, "Do you know what like the 16th chapel smells like?" He says, "No, but I've read it in a book." And then Robin Williams said something quote like, "You know all these things, but you're afraid of taking the next biggest leap into it." And I think this is also what he's describing, like this immensely. Like I have all this knowledge of it, but like no practical knowledge, and like the knowledge sort of paralyzes you because you have all this information, right? That is allowing you to critique every single move, and like that's the same thing Matt Damon does, right? Like he critiques every like example of love he sees enough to sort of see, and he has enough information to basically sort of look at all the holes, but he has no experience with it, right? And he's too afraid to take the leap into the unknown because he's worried that he's going to get hurt. He's worried that he's going to enter into an area that isn't his perfect ideal. He's worried. He can't the idea that like the knowledge in his head and the books he's read don't map on one-to-one with life. And I feel like that also just seems the same for like a lot of people in this little corner, right? Like everyone's an autodidact. Everyone knows everything about it, right? And they have so many critiques that they can continually critique every single thing, right? Because I think there's a little bit of fear there, right? Like there's a lot of fear of like showing up and actually like rolling the dice and saying like, yeah, I'm gonna go into this experience my full heart and I'm ready to go. Because there's something about having too much knowledge that you just paralyze you.
I think it's as again something with control. I think our idea, what we spoke about with control, really ties in here. As the problem, my assertion would be is that even if you don't wade into those waters, you are still in his world. So you really don't have the control that you think you have. Is what I think.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
If I could add an example, and it's a little morbid, but I apologize, but like I'll say it. But I think also it might be on Soloveitchik's mind as well. But there is this kind of like sort of an anecdote that I've heard that is in Judaism where if you see Judaism as a quid pro quo, like you belong to community, and that is kind of like your perspective. That is your dynamic with Judaism, for example. Why on earth would you continue to be Jewish after the Holocaust? Like when you immigrate, and people immigrated to the U.S. after that happened, some of them would just, try to get their children away from it as much as possible because they don't want to be, because all of the benefits that a religious community will give you, really, that turned out it's not a benefit to belong to a Jewish community around the 40s, 30s before that, but that's specifically that. So why would you, if you think rationally, why would you want to belong to that kind of community? And I guess that is one of the problem of holding only that perspective, because under some conditions it's not sustainable, and that obviously in some respect is problematic. And I wonder, like, if that is also part of what Soloveitchik thinks about as well, when he mentioned that.
My memory is terrible. I was listening to something when I when I was driving today, somebody was talking just in general about Soloveitchik, and they were talking about how he would dig into things. He wasn't just giving them these, quick 10-minute talks that were easy to digest. He would give them these long ones, and how he had used the Solomon. And he was talking about how the portion where the beloved, the woman goes, and she's already gone to bed. She's in her room. She hears him finally come knocking, and he was talking about this is God, and he was actually talking about how Rabbi Soloveitchik talked to people here, like in the West, after the Holocaust, that was adamantly saying you have not lost your faith, and he was talking about how ridiculous the illustration in the sorry, I've got half of the Hebrew in my mind, which means I'm also not getting the English out properly. Anyway, the Song of Songs, and how she's listing off the reasons not to go open the door, and how Rabbi Soloveitchik is saying those are ridiculous reasons. Like, realistically, when you've been searching for in the story, when she's been searching for the lover, and or in the terms of the Jewish people and the Holocaust, how strong faith stayed throughout the entire Holocaust, and likening those two things of the search, that kind of back and forth search going on in the Song of Songs, and the experience of people during the Holocaust who maintained their faith all through the difficult times, all through the darkness. Faith held, and then as soon as it's over, then you're going to lose it. And he's like, that doesn't, like, she's saying, I can't open the door. I've already gone to bed. So why would I get up and open the door? Oh, I've already washed my feet. Why would I get my feet dirty going to open the door? And it's like, who's knocking at your door. Go open the door, and when you were talking, Ben, like, I'm thinking that's what popped into my head, is that place where if you've desired something so much, the relationship, in reality between he was saying specifically between the Israelites and God, not even just the rest of us, but like, and this is the passion, and this is the emphasis, like, what he was impressing on people is just because it doesn't feel okay anymore, just because you have a billion reasons why not to, you still have not lost your faith. It's there. And I forget why I was saying that. But that really grabbed me today. And whatever you said really triggered that spot for me. That sense of the desperation and depth of faith holding on, then you don't just give it up. So why would you go to, synagogue? Why would you go to church? Why would you whatever? Because you're pursuing, because you have the opportunity to connect, I guess, with the one you've been wanting, is the sort of the answer I took from the story that was being told. I got to go back and listen to all of Rabbi Malot's thing on Song of Songs. I was going to do that before. Now I'm like, We've got to hear the whole thing.
Are we ready to move on to the epilogue?
There's an epilogue?
I think there was the chapter about Elisha.
It's chapter X. Is that the epilogue?
I mean, I think it's
Oh, the story of Elisha. Yeah,
epilogius.
Epilogue.
Is that a word?
it is now.
Emma, keep me honest. How do I say epilogic? Or did I just say it?
I don't know one, so just make up whatever you want.
I like it. That's the English way.
Indeed. Yeah, I was surprised to find this, I was surprised it ended with a story. It felt like it closed off, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a little bit more.
I mean, to me, it was just like an end cap of like, all right, let's take this case of Elisha, who was basically being an Adam 1 majestic man, badass, gets called into service by Elijah, gets his Jedi Torah training, and comes back into the world as a badass again, but having come down from the mountain, kind of like Moses, and then back into action. That's how I kind of took that story as like a way to sort of illustrate the aforementioned very dense philosophical stuff. So I think ending on a story was nice because it kind of gave it a little bit of closure, and connected it to, a real Bible story. And I don't know. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think it kind of might be able to afford us to even think about it more systematically, if you want to take it that way, right? Because if we just think about the story, there are Elisha has had, I don't know how to combine the Hebrew and the English. So Elisha has 3 modes, right? He has the majestic badass. I like that way. Think about it. He has this badass mode, and then he transitions into being this spiritual Jedi, and then he comes back as a Jedi plus badass at the end, infused, right? So there's 3 separate modes that we can think about that we also go through probably every day, and then there are 2 transitions, right? So how do we transition from being majestic to spiritual, to a men of faith, and how do we transition back into somebody that can combine those 2, that we come back to the world with that, and somehow reunite the 2 worlds. And I think it's a good point, Jonathan, that you just kind of encapsulated all of that in that story, and shows us how, at least in that very short narrative, that happens. So that's cool.
Yeah, it almost exemplifies the lesson by tying it back to a practical example. But to your point, kind of talks about how this is like a perennial or continuous dialectic activity. Like, I think he even talks about that being like it's constantly pulling both aspects together. It's not like advance retreat, but it's like a continuous kind of even forward progress, I guess, or direction. Every time I hear dialectic, though, I think Hegelian kind of synthesis, and it just doesn't really synthesize. It doesn't really resolve. It says both and, which is also kind of a cliche, but what can you do?
I have a question, because sometimes, like in Discord, when there's a discussion around some of the philosophers and about integrating, or like integrating contrasting viewpoints or whatever, how are, I guess if you've read some of the different philosophers, like you're saying it's Hegelian, how is that actually explained? Like I know sometimes there'll be how you have to take like two opposite things and bring them together, and I'm thinking it feels different than how I read it, so I'm curious, like, am I hearing the reading properly? Like, what does he mean when he says like Hegel, or if it's a Hegelian viewpoint, it must be something he's said.
I don't know that Soloveitchik said anything about Hegel specifically. I don't remember a reference to Hegel, but I do remember. But the dialectic is a catchphrase for Hegelian philosophy. I remember an example from one of my philosophy classes, which is a long time ago. So it's funny that I remember this example, and I'll probably butcher it here, but like the dialectic was explained to us like you have thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? Mm-hmm. And so an example is what was it? Like Susie is taller than her little sister, but shorter than her mom. So Susie is tall and Susie is short. And so how do you reconcile these things? It's like Susie is growing. So that was the synthesis. Now I might be getting that totally wrong. But it's not necessarily a reconciliation of opposites, but it's kind of a judo move that sort of recontextualizes both. Right.
Okay.
But I think dialectic can also just mean simply just, point counterpoint, and just more of a dialogue or something. I'm not going to say dialogos. If you repronounce a word, you can kind of like redefine it, and then you can put it in your own catalog of mispronounced words.
It's not so much the repronouncing it as the translating it back into Greek.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, sure. Right. That's right. So I'm just gonna use a lot of like I'm gonna learn Hebrew words and just create a whole.
Throw them in there, and then you can do it yourself.
Old languages, yeah, right.
Why else would you study to be a classics major?
You too could be John Vervaeke. Well, I'm relieved that we're not reading another Soloveitchik book. I think.
Yeah, I think it'll be.
I think our benevolent dictator Jacob made a good move by calling an audible. I now have a bunch of books because we just made a bunch of decisions, and I was like, Amazon, buy a book. Oh, we're gonna read this one. Amazon, buy a book. So.
Yeah, I gotta do that.
Yeah.
By Henry Abramson.
Mm-hmm.
Abramson.
Abramson.
Yeah, that's how you say it.
We were struggling with pronouncing it at the beginning.
I know. I heard. I always have this thing where I'm like, well, I should catch up on the stream before I join, so I'm not like, hey, like jumping in the middle of a conversation. So I have to listen to it at 2x speed.
So I need help with the question here that's posed at the end of chapter X. Is modern man of faith entitled to a more privileged position and a less exacting and sacrificial role?
I think that's a rhetorical question. That's how I interpret it. Is it a rhetorical question where the answer is clearly no?
Right. But again, this I think we can open up to a broader conversation of does this book work today? Because I think that he was writing in a different time, in a different place that was asking people to do differently than we're at today. I feel like Soloveitchik would be very much angry at Peterson as well as Young, right? He wouldn't really be happy with these people and how they're going about it. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I'm not sure I get your point that he was writing it to people that to a time that is not what we have right now. I know exactly
okay, well, I'm basically contextualizing it that I remember seeing a graph talking about preaching in different areas, and basically in the 50s, all it pretty much was just trying to stir people up to basically go back to church. That was what a lot of Graham and all those people was. And then after that, we had the seeker movement, and then after that, we sort of have the current resistant movement to religion. And I guess it's a question of it could be a totally different mindset, but what I think Soloveitchik is trying to do is ask nominal Jewish people to sort of step up to the plate. And I think the difference is today, again, Orthodox is growing, so that can be different, but I think asking people to step to the plate who have never been on the plate is very different. We have more people who have never been on the plate, don't even know they're Jewish. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
I think so. Yeah, but the question is how severed is. Question is how severed is the tie? How do you maybe you see it as more severed than maybe I would think about it. And again, yes, this is very contextual because the Jewish experience would be different than Christian experience. Also, in America, it's probably different because, again, maybe you grow up in a society that's less Christian, more Christian. In Europe, maybe it's less Christian. In America, it's more Christian. So,
well, Ben, well, since you've sort of gone through this experience, do you think if Soloveitchik sort of came up to you and sort of posed this to you immediately, you would take the challenge? As well as, do you think if Soloveitchik was talking to the modern people of Israel right now, they would have related to this? Or do you think they need more of an on-ramp? Because I feel like they need more of an on-ramp.
I think that a lot of people that I know are thinking about exactly this. Maybe not in the way that he is maybe explaining it specifically in this book, and what he's saying here is very similar to what I think VIII-End talks about, what Peugeot talks about. The things that I've heard many times before, and things that I see my friends and family are going through, of thinking, okay, I've had a person tell me, listen, I have kids, I have a good job, I'm making enough money, I have investments that are making money for me. I'm talking very practically now. I don't need to worry about money. I have kids and they're healthy, they're doing fine. Well, I don't know what to do now.
Right. I'm not saying that these questions aren't happening, but I think I was listening to one of the streams with you and Jacob, and I think Jacob said, and no, I think that was the Tanya streams, and Jacob said that you can take things at a time, and I don't think Soloveitchik is really saying that. Like I think Soloveitchik is making a bigger claim. I mean that's what it seems like the ending thing is. Like is modern man of faith entitled to a more privileged position and a less exacting and sacrificial role? Like if you're saying, oh, I can just do some things, right? That seems like the person is asking for a privileged position and a less exacting and sacrificial role. So I'm not saying the questions are different. I'm saying Soloveitchik's challenge to the person is different. Like Jordan Peterson isn't asking you to do everything. I don't even think Paul Vanderklayt is asking you to do everything. I don't even think Jonathan Peugeot is asking you to do everything, right? Soloveitchik is, and I'm saying that's the difference. Soloveitchik is not saying, like, I think the modern form of how we are sort of reaching out to people is stick your toe in the water, see how it feels, and then move forward. And I think Soloveitchik says, no, dive in now.
Yeah, I think I get your point now, and yeah, I tend to agree with it. And this is probably maybe part of like the internal Jewish kind of like distinction between like the Litvak, the I guess the European. I mean the Litvak, that it's like very like do it, like you have to do it this way. The more that type of person, and the Hasidic, which is kind of like, especially Chabad, obviously, which is more of like you can take it one step at a time. I think the important thing, and what I appreciate being someone that is much more my rhythm is much more, is not the Soloveitchik rhythm. It's not the jump in the pool. Is more of like the Chabad way. What I do appreciate about Soloveitchik is, and what I think is very important for me, is to be aware of the ideal. If I know what the ideal is, then I know what I'm playing, what I'm aiming for. And I might not get it well, and that translates in a very practical way. Like if I'm trying to like not eat meat and dairy, like I know what the ideal is, and sometimes I can do it more or less, but at least I appreciate the ideal. And when I try to plan, when I try to plan my week, even let's say, I try to plan for that ideal, even though sometimes it doesn't happen. So that's what I appreciate about people that just tell you, like, this is the ideal and this is where you need to go. And then you kind of like figure out how to do it. And obviously maybe the expectation of you is going to grow and grow and grow. So once somebody actually sees that you're doing this for a while and you've been challenging yourself in a way, and we talk about this in the Tanya as well, if they see you slacking, or if they see that you're not challenging yourself, then that is where they're going to amp up this, okay, go deeper and go deeper and go deeper, right? So
yeah, it's like it's more about like the orientation and the starting point, right? And so in the same way that someone could be a beginner in weightlifting and they can only lift the bar, but the guy next to them is doing like whatever they do, 450 pounds or something crazy, right? And like the guy putting up more weight obviously has been at it longer, has built up more strength, experience, but the orientation, the mental starting point is the same across both.
Right, but I just want to hone this in. Do you think Soloveitchik's style can work today? That's what I'm saying is, that's why I keep returning to this idea that I think he's writing to a specific time, and I don't think that's applicable today, because I don't think Soloveitchik would be okay with the idea of sort of leveling up, because I don't see it in this book, the idea of leveling. I see it very much, as well as Hollow-Hearted Man, right? Like, I see it very much an impression upon you, rather than just saying, like, yeah, you can level up.
I think he's writing. It's definitely inside baseball, right? Like he published this in an Orthodox Jewish journal, so he's speaking to an audience that is going to be more initiated. So I think contextually you're right. Like this isn't for the complete uninitiated at all. I don't know, Ben, what do you think?
I'm trying to think about this another Vervaeke term. What Adam and Eve are, right? Eve is a help against Adam. What's the Vervaeke term for processing? No, I forget.
Oh, like opponent
process. Yeah, I get what you're saying in terms of like, and this is why the Hasidic movement, I think, part of why it started, which they thought people need to kind of like, part of it is like people need to have a more kind of like staggered understanding of things, and not just like punching them in the face with expectations.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think it's important to have another side in the conversation, which always urges you. It's a kind of like a good cop, bad cop, that always mentions, no, this is the ideal. This is what we would go for. We need to go for, even if it's just for the sake of playing this holistic game of trying to push people even more into towards the ideal. Right? I mean, this is kind of like in a negotiation, right? Mentioning a very high number or something like you mention it not because you think people will actually reach that number, will actually pay you that amount of money, is because you want to kind of like anchor it towards a certain ideal that you have, and then that's kind of like the ballpark of where you're going to play. So you can imagine this is what Soloveitchik is doing to help the people that are what he's doing in a broader context of not just him and his audience, but other Jewish kind of quarters. And I think that applies to more people. It's not necessarily to choose. I think you can take that obviously broader. But I agree with you, Trina. I get your point.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're on. I think that. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think like the typical or quintessential Christian call to conversion is like you like give your life to Jesus, you say a prayer, you get baptized, you go to church, you do all this stuff, and it's very whole hog, right?
I think I kind of disagree with that. It depends if you're a Protestant or a Catholic, but I would say the Protestant is, okay, say these 3 words, say this sort of formula,
yep,
and then you're saved. Okay, then try going to church and doing everything right. Like, I think Paul Van der Clay makes the point where it's like, I said the words, I should be good. Now you're telling me I have to go to church and do all this extra stuff? You know what I mean? It does, like, I'm saying that in comparison to what I know. And what I know is something where it's like the call to conversion is, we're working through this. We're working up to something. When I would say, like, modern Christianity sometimes feels just like this sort of like, I say 5 words and then I'm good. Rather than like, no, you need to do all these things.
I guess.
Yeah, but you don't have the
what's the statement you're making with that, I guess?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to be disagreeable.
No, I know. I'm just trying to like get to the heart of like what the point you're trying to make is like.
An Orthodox call to faith is really different than a sort of Christian non-denominational call to faith, and especially like a Jehovah's Witness call to faith.
Yeah.
Because I feel like those mean something more than that. And I'm not disagreeing with like the idea of the call to faith, but I think you have to recognize what we're asking of people sometimes. And I feel like, and I don't think modern people are okay with that. Like I think more people are in the sort of seeker movement, sort of try it out, okay, mess up a lot, rather than this repent or be damned sort of thing. Like I don't think that exists as much today.
Right. Well, I mean, you had to go and mention the Orthodox, which I think really complicates it because there's a much slower process.
No, I meant Orthodox Judaism. My bad.
Well, that too. I mean, Orthodox Christianity and Orthodox Judaism are both pretty slow conversion processes, typically. Like comparatively to like your evangelical, it's like pray the prayer, go to the altar call, do the thing, right? I mean, even the Catholic Church makes you wait till, the time of year where they typically do baptisms and all the sacraments and stuff, right? So,
and like go to a bunch of classes and stuff.
Yeah, and but I guess like here's the difference, right? Like when I was in New York a couple weeks ago, it was Sukkot or just before, early in the week, and so you had Hasidic guys hanging out in Manhattan with their Judar. Like, and it's crazy how they knew who was Jewish in our group, and they try to get them to like shake the Ben. Help me out. What are they with the lemon? Yeah. Thanks. And like that's the whole point, right? Like do the mitzvah, right? Like maybe you're not religious, maybe you're not, or particularly religious, right? But like that's kind of the Hasidic way, right? Like Ben, like you do what you can do, and you do more, and you do more, and it's like it's not like you just have to do this, but it's like just do it, right? Like it's kind of an end in itself. So it's a different mentality, but it comes from that same orientation that is in this book, I think, which is heeding the call of Adam 2.
And kind of always wanting to do as much as you can, which means always wanting to do more than you are now. Which is that sort of like...
Yeah, like incremental improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's an interesting sort of combination, I think, to have both like you should be doing all of it, but also you should at least do as much as you can. And holding both of those things sometimes is not easy.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, I think Chabad, which is the part of Hasidic Judaism, which is who is very much like that's their way, do get criticized for that. So it's not like they're doing it and everybody's like fine with it. There is trepidation around it from other quarters that say, no, you're not holding people enough to like you're expecting too little from people, or you're not doing enough, or you're letting them go down a notch. Like I've seen a conversation where it was between a rabbi and like this an Orthodox couple, and they were talking about just like parenting and working with children, and they were talking about how there are some children that go they go astray or lose some of their faith or struggling with it, that some of the Chabad rabbis would be more lenient with them, will, maybe let them wear pants, for example, for the girls, which is something that the maybe other Orthodox communities would not let them do that. But Chabad is like, okay, if I let you do that, maybe we can focus on like how to improve from there, or how to kind of like slowly figure out what is working or what doesn't make sense or stuff like that. So yeah, these are two different approaches.
Mhm. Mhm. It's something that Catholicism is very much struggling with right now too.
I think
Almost framed sort of the same way, actually.
Yeah. Within Catholicism, like people that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah.
How does it manifest, Emma? Like, say more about it.
Well, I'm thinking especially like traditional Catholicism versus Vatican II Catholicism, for instance. Like, things should be in Latin and we should not worry about you understanding it, versus like, let's put the mass into English and from there we can scale up, getting you, more invested, doing more things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's the biggest example off the top of my head, but even then, the it's framed as like same-sex blessings or whatever, but that's not necessarily the best way to frame it. That's usually a very inflammatory way to state it. The idea of like, what do we do with people? Should we be trying to figure out how to get them to stay as close as we can? Or should we just say, like, if they actually want it, they'll do it on our terms? It's a hard thing to figure out. It's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you apply too much pressure, or you bend too much, things can break.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't bend enough, then they're not actually conforming. I mean, I guess that's all about like methods and tactics, right? For like preaching or trying to convert people, right? So it's like some people react well and have success with fire and brimstone. Other people have success with the more, loving, peace and mercy approach. Gentle, yes,
Yeah.
gentle. I mean, yeah, so yeah, I guess it's more about harshness and gentleness, right? And that's a perennial struggle, or a perennial conflict. And there's risks of both, but there's also benefits to both. And you don't always know. I don't think people always necessarily know how to self-select into those either.
No, I don't think they do.
Yeah, I think it's there might be a realization there, or it feels to me like, first of all, maybe one thing to consider is that there is space for both approaches. And I think really where maybe it's things get more problematic is that the problem becomes not the approach, but that the different people will use different ideals, so they would be satisfied with different ideals. And I think definitely I think that in Judaism, that's kind of like when you think about the different denominations, the line really is between like the conservative and the reform, which obviously have the method, the approach of like being more inclusive and trying to get people involved in something, but they also very much hold different ideals, even in legalistic terms, which really separates them from Orthodox or from Orthodox Judaism, even though it's not necessarily from Orthodox Judaism, right, as defined against it. So I think that's kind of like that's an interesting problem of like the differences in ideals are really where the divisiveness really happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this often the same person needs different approaches at different points in their life, which also complicates it. So it's not like people who need this go over here, people who need this go over here. Like, depending on where you are and what's going on right now, you're going to need something different.
Sure.
It is kind of interesting, though, Ben, to your point, though, about, Reform, conservative Judaism are much more of the inclusive, welcoming, the softer, gentler approach.
Mm-hmm.
But the line between them and Orthodox Judaism is a pretty stark one that has to do with beliefs, legal, lots of things, right? And the Orthodox side also has its gentleness and its approach that mirrors that, right? But it also has the fire and brimstone approach, which you don't see at all in the conservative reform, right?
Unless you're thinking about ideologically the liberal side of the reform.
Okay, yeah, sure. But
yeah,
again,
I get your point. Yeah.
So, but I think that applies. It's like you'd never get unserious fire and brimstone from any religion. Like, if no, it's just a thought that came up. Like, I was just thinking about this. Like, but you actually raised a pretty interesting point, though, with sort of the militant left, kind of like more like political side of it. Like that's I think a pretty big theological, or like we're talking about like apples and oranges at that point. But anyway, food for thought. I'm going to turn into a pumpkin in about 5 minutes, though. Just fair warning.
Yeah, same.
He's already a pumpkin based on his.
Yep. No, say the jokes. Keep going.
When are you going to get on your flight to come home?
Yep. Yeah. My last flight.
Are you in the mainland?
Yes. I'm in Chicago.
Oh,
Well, hello.
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 You're very close.
Getting closer. Yep.
Wait.
O'Hare or Midway? One of the two.
Yep.
Yep. Jonathan, are you in the Illinois area?
I'm around the lake in Michigan.
Ah. I'm downstate.
Are you sure Champaign-Urbana? But
Yep.
judging by your Illinois shirt.
Blue and orange shirt? Yeah, that's me.
My band played a show there once upon a time.
You were in a band?
Yeah. Is there a bar called Mike and Molly's down there?
I don't know.
You don't know. All right.
Probably.
You're not a bar type.
Not that much.
Miss Classics. There's no classics at the bar.
So actually, some of
Definitely.
my classmates are pretty social people. I'm just not.
Oh, classics people are booze hounds for sure. I mean, it takes all kinds.
They don't just drink like beer, you know what I mean?
No, they drink mulled wine. And,
Yeah.
what am I thinking of? What's
Rosé.
There are lots of like pub type bars around here though, so there is actually a lot of beer. Anyway.
All right.
Do we want to think about? Do we want to close it? So first of all, do we want to close it out, or before we talk about next chapters for the next book? Any last thoughts about Lonely Men of Faith?
I'm probably going to go back and reread it another time because I wasn't able to read it very carefully, and what I did read, I got a lot out of. So I'm grateful to have been introduced to this because I think it's really interesting, and I wish I could have given it more time.
Ben, are you going to read the Hebrew for us and the Kabbalah of Forgiveness?
I can. I have the Kindle. Yeah, I noticed that there's Hebrew, and I got the Kindle for this, so this is gonna be interesting.
Good.
Yeah.
If that works, I might just get the book.
I'm going to look at let's see the contents here. So we have about 200 pages. So maybe we do it in like 4 or 5 sessions. We've been doing them every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So 50 pages in 2 weeks, is that sensible?
That sounds doable.
Although I should say that the page numbers, there's a lot of gaps in a lot of like pages like this where it's like blank and then like one paragraph. So like it might be that, you know.
Well, also it's divided by levels. So he talks about what
Right.
are there? 13 levels.
Maybe we try to get through level 1 because there's some introduction.
Okay.
So level 1 ends at page 45.
Yeah.
So 45 pages
All right.
in. And if it's like super breezy and whatever, we just bite off more in round 2.
Next time. Yeah.
It is also Kabbalah, so it might be heavy, maybe he's making it light enough, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I haven't it's the first time I've opened it, so.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, so.
Yeah, I need to order.
All right, y'all. Well, safe travels and night night.
Alrighty.
Okay, everybody. Thank you.
Okay.
Night.
Good night.